It's time for week 8 of the Criterion Challenge 2022. That brings us to the theme of the 1980s. Links to all relevant challenge info in the description, as always. For the theme of the 1980s, I've chosen Louis Malle's 1981 film My Dinner with Andre. The film has a fairly simple setup. Actor Wallace Shawn's meeting an old friend, theatre director Andre Gregory, for dinner. A meal Wallace has been trying to avoid for months, but can't be put off any longer. The film's essentially made up of the conversation that the pair have over dinner. The two play fictionalised versions of themselves and also wrote the film together. Some of you might be familiar with this film through the TV show Community, where one of the characters imitates the film during a birthday dinner. I first heard about the film through The Simpsons, which obviously is a constant fountain of knowledge.
Thirsting for a way to name the unnameable, to express the inexpressible.
Tell me more.
You might also be familiar with Wallace Shawn as Mr. Hall in Clueless, or as the voice of Rex in the Toy Story films.
I'm going for fearsome here, but I just don't feel it. I think I'm just coming off as annoying.
If you had only heard the film's premise, it's possible you'd assume it might be boring or pretentious, something that would be hard to engage with. I've to admit I did have those kinds of thoughts myself before I watched it, a concern that I'd find it hard to stay interested. After watching the film though, I can safely say I need not have worried. Though the conversation does stray towards the intellectual on a fair few occasions, it's never dull. For me, I felt like it was a very comfortable film. I'm sure we can all think of a time that we've dreaded a social outing only to find ourselves getting drawn in and involved once we actually get there. In My Dinner with Andre, there's a definite flow and narrative to the conversation as a whole, but rather than going into the specifics of it, I'd rather just highlight a few details about the film that I enjoyed. In these videos I always try to include interesting and appropriate footage from the film. This time the footage is going to seem a lot more uniform than usual, as the vast majority of the film is simply the conversation between the two main characters set in a restaurant, the titular Dinner with Andre. The film begins with Wallace Shawn making his way to the restaurant through the streets of New York. While we hear his inner monologue as voiceover, and there are two things in particular that he said in this voiceover that really tickled me. First, he says he likes to imagine himself as a private detective, since he enjoys asking questions so much and finding out about people. Directly after he tells us this in voiceover, the first question that we hear him ask Andre is,
By the way, is he still thin? What?
a banal question about whether or not a man they both know is still thin. Just that juxtaposition, Wallace thinking about finding asking questions to be such an interesting thing, and then directly after that, asking someone something so dull, I couldn't help but find it funny. Shortly after that, Wallace's inner monologue continues as the pair are seated and begin their conversation proper at the table. He says that they talk for a while about Wallace's work, their respective partners and so on, until he says he finally gets around to asking Andre what he's been up to in the last few years, saying that Andre seemed reluctant at first but eventually relented and began talking after Wallace kept asking about it. However, although we don't actually hear it over Wallace's inner monologue, the conversation he's talking about is playing out right in front of our eyes, and in actuality there's only 20 seconds between the pair starting to talk and the voiceover fading out for Andre to begin talking about what he's been up to. Really, it seems unlikely that 20 seconds was enough time for work talk, family talk and persistent questioning from Wallace. I think it's an interesting thing to think about. Is it just because we're in film land and that kind of compression's easy to get away with? I prefer to think that it's because Wallace's character likes to exaggerate. For him it seems a much more interesting version of events if he had to prize the details from Andre through determination and skill, rather than everything just being freely given up to him. It's a kind of simple detail that passes by in a flash, but when you look back at it, it can really tell you quite a bit about a character. There's one last detail I want to mention that comes about 20 minutes into the pair's conversation. Andre's talking about a flag, and Wallace reaches for his glass of wine, never breaking eye contact with Andre, and he carefully grasps at the glass, eventually finding it sightlessly, picking it up and taking a drink, all while remaining engaged with Andre's conversation. Again, it's just something small, but it's interesting to think about. Is it a mark of politeness, or is Wallace actually starting to become engaged in the social occasion that he had been dreading for so long? Although I did say that the film's engaging throughout, there were some occasions that I found myself slipping a little bit out of the conversation for a few seconds and focusing on something else, like the particular way that the bread was arranged, or how the straws were fanned out in their containers. I think this kind of mirrors real life conversation though, where sometimes you might just space out and focus on something irrelevant before snapping back into what the other person's saying. It's probably because the film's so focused on Wallace and Andre and their conversation. For the majority of the film, they're the only faces that we see, although waitstaff do appear every now and then. Otherwise, the only sign of any other life once their conversation begins is the chatter of other restaurant patrons heard faintly in the background. The effect of this hyper-focus on two characters meant I tried to pay particular attention to which character was in shot at what time, and when both were in frame, who was facing the camera and who did we only see the back of. In essence, all that we have visually is a person talking and another person reacting. How do you construct that to tell a story? Could the trajectory of the conversation be tracked just through framing and composition? I think the film did do this successfully, but I'd have to watch it again to really analyse that side of things. Maybe that's something for the future. In the end, the philosophical questions that arise during Wallace and Andre's conversation remain unresolved, and the pair go their separate ways. Rather than this lack of resolution being unsatisfying, it seems entirely appropriate. Sometimes you just run out of time, the restaurant, bar, cafe closes and you have to go home, or sometimes it's something that can't be resolved. I think all this works in the film's favour and adds to its overall comfortable feel. All in all, I'm glad to have been able to be much more positive about the film this week compared to some other weeks, and I hope that this can happen many more times throughout the challenge. As for a rating, I'd probably give this film an 8 out of 10. How's your Criterion challenge coming along? What do you think of My Dinner with Andre if you've seen it? Let me know in the comments below, and thanks for watching.